A black teenage girl is escorted off a first-class flight, not for a crime, but for speaking French to her mother. The airline staff claims she was acting suspicious. The only evidence, her fluency. Cameras roll. Passengers shout. But then she pulls out her Harvard ID and a sealed envelope addressed to the CEO. What's inside makes the pilot go pale, and then the plane door slams shut from the outside. Before we deep dive into this interesting story, subscribe to our channel and tell us where you're watching from. Share in the comments below. The sky hung low over Manhattan, veiled in a pearly mist that blurred the sharp edges of its tallest towers. But on 67th and Park Avenue, one building gleamed as if untouched by weather or worry. The Zenith Luxor, a corporate skyscraper wrapped in glass and gold, stood not just tall but proud. It didn't need to scream wealth. It whispered it with Italian marble lobbies, glass elevators, and scent diffusers that pumped imported fig and sandalwood into the air. Inside, tension festered beneath the perfume of luxury. Employees buzzed like bees stirred too early in spring. A tycoon, anonymous, absurdly rich, and impossibly influential, was set to visit that morning. Rumors painted him as a royal investor from the Gulf, a silent partner in the building's holding company. No one had ever seen him. No one even knew his real name. But word was, he had flown in overnight, on a private Boeing 7087, with a gold leaf interior, and a crew that spoke only Arabic. Executives wore suits a shade too sharp, smiles a shade too wide, and as always, the unspoken rituals of power played out with sterile precision. Black staff relegated to back corridors, kitchen entries, and janitorial closets. Not one was invited into the conference room where real decisions would be made. Not one except those who served silently. Kendra Miles pushed her mop across the marbled lobby floor with slow, practiced strokes. At 46, she moved with a kind of quiet grace, like someone used to being invisible. Her gray custodial uniform was clean but worn at the knees. She had tied her hair back into a low bun, and her face bore the calm, unreadable expression of someone who'd stopped reacting to microaggressions decades ago. Overhead, the chandeliers shimmered with cruel indifference. Conversations floated past her like wind through leaves. Conversations not meant for her to hear. "We can't have the janitorial staff walking past the boardroom while he's here," muttered a white assistant manager near the reception desk. "This guy's from Dubai, right? They value discipline, clean lines, no surprises." "Discipline?" another replied with a low chuckle. "He's worth more than this building. Let's not startle him with street-level hires." Kendra didn't flinch. She kept mopping, moving closer to the entrance of the executive conference wing. The building's racism was never overt, but always present, like static electricity. Enough to shock, but never to ignite, until now. At exactly 9:02 a.m., a black limousine stopped at the curb. A driver in a white kaftan stepped out, opened the rear door, and out came the man. He was tall, dressed not in a Western suit but a dark thobe, tailored and flowing. His beard was thick but trimmed with the precision of a man used to scrutiny. On his wrist, not a Rolex, but a vintage Patek Philippe, the kind collectors would kill to touch. His eyes scanned the building entrance like he was seeing through it. Silence rippled across the lobby. Phones stopped ringing. Fingers hovered above keyboards. The receptionist stood but forgot to speak. Kendra leaned on her mop, instinctively straightening her back. No introduction. No words. The tycoon walked past them all. Escorted by a white-gloved security team, he stepped into the boardroom where every top-level executive was seated, rehearsed, and radiating nervous confidence. One of them, James Carlisle, the white-haired CEO of the U.S. branch, stood and extended his hand. The tycoon did not take it. Instead, he looked around the room, nodded once, and spoke, loud, clear, in Arabic. A long string of syllables that wrapped around itself like calligraphy spoken aloud. Beautiful, measured, mysterious. The executives blinked, tilted heads, glanced sideways at each other. Then came the silence. 15 seconds. No one spoke. A few smiled awkwardly, assuming they had been greeted. One assistant whispered to another, "Was that a prayer or a threat?" Kendra heard it from outside the door. She froze. Her heart didn't pound. It tightened. Because what he'd said wasn't polite. It wasn't casual. It was layered. A question, yes, but also a test. "Before I place my fortune in your hands, show me the soul of this place. I speak not to your resumes, but your character. Respond not to impress me, but to reveal yourselves." Still silence. Kendra exhaled slowly. She wasn't meant to speak. She wasn't meant to be seen. But her body turned before her mind consented. She walked into the room. No one noticed her at first. Not the way they noticed power or wealth. Just a mop. A uniform. A shadow out of place. Carlyle's brow furrowed. An executive whispered something sharp. Something about clearance. But then Kendra spoke. In Arabic. Not just fluent, flawless. Her accent had the clipped cadence of someone educated in literature. Not just language. Her tone was low, respectful, but there was fire beneath it. We greet you not with facades but with fractures. This place wears marble but walks on fault lines, yet even cracked soil can bloom when challenged. Every head turned. The Tycoon's eyes locked onto hers like steel recognizing steel. His expression didn't change, but something shifted. Around the table, jaws tightened. Carlyle's face drained of color. Someone cleared their throat too loudly. Another reached for their phone, as if to verify what reality had just offered them. Kendra stood still. Her words lingered like incense, refusing to fade. The Tycoon stepped forward, eyes still locked on hers. Then he smiled. Slightly. A twist of the lips, not of amusement, but respect. He turned back to the boardroom and said something else in Arabic, quieter this time, but deadly clear. Only Kendra understood it. And still, you judged her by her silence. But now you will answer to her voice. Carlyle's hands trembled as he looked from Kendra to the Tycoon. His breath caught. His carefully curated posture collapsed just slightly. A storm had entered the room, and it had not come from overseas. The Tycoon turned to his translator and gave a new instruction, one that made the translator blink, hesitate, then nod reluctantly. The translator looked around the boardroom, then pointed directly at Kendra and said he wants her in the boardroom. Now, everyone else out. The silence in the boardroom didn't end when the Tycoon's words stopped echoing. It stretched like elastic, pulling tighter, threatening to snap. Kendra stood still, unsure if she was expected to leave or speak again. The translator repeated the instruction louder this time, carefully enunciating each word in accented English. He says she stays. Everyone else leaves. The room fractured instantly. The executives exchanged glances that teetered between confusion and insult. Carlyle rose, lips parted as if he might protest, but the Tycoon raised a single hand. The gesture was small, but it held the weight of kingdoms. They filed out, slowly, deflated, rattled. Kendra stayed rooted to the floor. Her hands clenched around the mop handle like it was a cane holding her upright. Once the last suit had shuffled out, the heavy doors clicked shut behind them, sealing her inside with the man whose smile had just rewritten the hierarchy of the building. But before either could speak, Kendra's mind slipped backward. Not out of fear, out of muscle memory, out of years spent burying the parts of herself that had no place in marble halls. She was born on the corner of North Avenue and Pulaski Street in West Baltimore, where opportunity passed through but never stayed. Her mother, Dolores Miles, worked nights at a diner and spent her days walking Kendra to libraries and free tutoring programs, even when rent was late and heat was scarce. From age 6, Kendra had a gift: language. Not just words, but rhythm, accent, meaning wrapped in silence. She'd mimic Spanish commercials before she could spell. By 12, she could hold a basic conversation in Arabic and Haitian Creole, just from listening to the bus drivers, shopkeepers, and neighbors who'd crossed oceans to land in their battered neighborhood. Her mother called her my babble baby and told her, "You'll speak your way out of this zip code." Kendra believed her. Enough to turn down the streets when gangs offered fast money. Enough to carry 2 backpacks, one with books, the other with laundry for her after-school library jobs. She wasn't just smart, she was relentless. At 17, her test scores shattered records. Harvard came knocking with a full scholarship. But the first time she stepped onto the Cambridge campus, Kendra realized intelligence didn't level playing fields. Her skin announced her before her words could. Students assumed she was there for a diversity initiative. Professors often mistook her for an aide. One even asked her to empty a trash can during a late-night study session. Still, she didn't complain. She excelled. She double-majored in Middle Eastern languages and political theory. She lived in the library. She memorized ancient texts. She translated philosophical treatises in Arabic, Farsi, and Hebrew before most of her peers could order coffee in French. And when the UN recruited her straight out of grad school, she thought the tide had turned. In her 20s, she was posted in embassies from Morocco to Lebanon. She wore suits, gave interviews, interpreted for diplomats. Once in Tehran, she delivered a simultaneous translation during a nuclear energy summit that left 5 ambassadors stunned into silence. Not just because of her fluency, but because she improved their words without changing them. But in the background, something darker crept in. At every level, she noticed a pattern. Arab speakers with darker skin were dismissed. Iranian sources were translated selectively. In internal reports, phrases were softened, cultural context stripped, entire warnings reworded to serve predetermined narratives. And the man at the center of it all? Ambassador Gerald Langston, a white, polished, Midwestern diplomat, with Ivy League polish, and a Midwestern drawl. He adored being seen as multicultural, often bragging about how color doesn't matter to me. But behind closed doors, he would routinely mock black interpreters, question their objectivity, and overrule translations that didn't align with UN values. Kendra first clashed with him during a debrief from Aleppo. A Syrian professor had warned that Western intervention was being used as cover for resource seizures. Yet Langston had her remove the segment entirely. When she pushed back, he warned her. "You're a translator, not a crusader. Don't let your race confuse your role." She reported him. Officially, through the proper channels. Nothing happened. Instead, her contract was mysteriously not renewed. Her credentials vanished from UN records. Background checks flagged her as potentially biased. One academic journal where she'd published a pivotal linguistic analysis received an anonymous complaint of plagiarism. Her name became radioactive. She applied to 42 jobs in 1 year. Got 3 interviews. No calls back. Eventually, her mother's health worsened. She moved back to the States. Took a job, any job, to get health insurance. She signed on as janitorial staff for Zenith Luxor, after 2 months of silence. The mop, she discovered, was safer than microphones. Floors didn't lie. They didn't ask her to translate lies or filter the truth. And now, here she was. Years later, in a boardroom with a man who had just shattered that silence with 1 sentence. The Tycoon gestured to the seat across from him. "Kendra Miles," he said, finally, in English. "You are not who they think you are." She sat down slowly, her heart careful but her eyes sharp. "Then who am I, sir?" His smile was patient, but his tone precise. "You are the only person in this building who responded to truth in its original form." She felt heat creep into her face. "I only spoke what I heard." "Exactly," he nodded. "You listened. You didn't wait to be spoken to. You didn't need permission to understand. That is what separates leaders from puppets." Kendra narrowed her eyes. "What do you want with me?" The Tycoon leaned back, his posture regal, but his gaze piercing. "I want to know why a Harvard-educated linguist with UN clearance is pushing a mop in Midtown Manhattan." Kendra hesitated. She could lie, say nothing, say everything. But something in his presence, his choice to speak only Arabic, his refusal to acknowledge their hierarchy, unlocked her tongue. So she told him about the erased reports. The racial profiling, the threat veiled in Langston's smiling voice, the silence that followed her through applications, libraries, backrooms. She told him about the weight of being hypervisible and ignored at the same time, about watching her mother die while she cleaned mirrors that only reflected everything she used to be. The Tycoon didn't interrupt, didn't blink. When she finished, the silence was thick. He reached into a leather folder beside him and slid it across the table. Inside, a confidential UN briefing from 2014. Her name, her translation, her redacted lines. Kendra's throat tightened. "Where did you get this?" "I collect truth," he said simply. "Especially when it's buried alive." She looked up at him, eyes wet but defiant. "So you brought me here for justice?" "No," he said. "I brought you here for proof." A pause. "Proof," he continued, "that America still doesn't recognize brilliance unless it wears the right face." Kendra swallowed hard. "And now," he said, standing, "they will be forced to." He walked to the door, opened it. Outside, the executives waited, leaning, whispering, sweating. The Tycoon turned back to her. "In 10 minutes, he said, "you will return to this room. But this time, not alone. You will sit at the head of this table. They will listen, or I will take everything from them." Her voice barely a whisper. "Why me?" His reply, "Because you didn't ask to be seen. You made yourself heard." As he stepped out, Kendra's phone buzzed violently in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and froze. Unknown number. We know what you did in Havana. The hallway outside the executive boardroom had never known true chaos until today. When the Tycoon re-emerged, his quiet confidence unsettled the power balance like a slow earthquake, and when he made the announcement, his demand that Kendra Miles would return with him and be seated at the table, it shattered decorum into shards of panic. "No," Carlyle blurted, stepping in front of the door. "She doesn't have clearance. This is a secure meeting." "She's just the janitor," another exec whispered sharply to the Tycoon's assistant, not realizing she spoke loud enough for Kendra to hear. "She must have memorized a few phrases from a movie." Someone else scoffed. Kendra stood off to the side, back against the wall, the weight of every slur she hadn't responded to now pressing down like an invisible boulder. The head of HR, pale and visibly sweating, tugged her jacket collar. "What do we do? This isn't protocol. We can't just have a non-credentialed staff member in an investor level." The CEO, James Carlyle, yanked his phone from his pocket and dialed legal. His voice trembled at the edges as he barked, "Get me Morgan on the line. Now." "No, not voicemail. This is urgent." Meanwhile, the Tycoon remained at the entrance of the boardroom, arms behind his back like a man prepared to watch a kingdom crumble without lifting a finger. Finally, he spoke just one line, and for the first time that morning, in crisp English, "If she goes, I go." The words were soft, but they struck like a gavel in a silent courtroom. Every executive froze. Their survival instincts kicked in, but they lacked a unified direction. Should they appease him, push back, call the chairman? Someone muttered something about PR optics, but no one moved. Kendra could feel their eyes now, not just watching, but calculating, racing through every racist stereotype they'd ever silently believed. She could almost hear the equation in their minds. Janitor, Pole Black, Arabic, anomaly, or threat. She didn't speak. Not because she was afraid, but because silence, used well, could be sharper than any retort. Finally, the Tycoon tilted his head. "Gentlemen," he said, tone chillingly polite, "am I mistaken? Or is this company part of a global portfolio known for innovation, diversity, and 21st century values?" A vice president swallowed hard. "Yes, sir, absolutely. We pride ourselves on that." "Then prove it," he said, and stepped aside for Kendra to enter. The boardroom was colder now, both in temperature and in spirit. Its long mahogany table, once a symbol of power, now resembled a battlefield. Kendra walked in, her shoes silent against the rug, and took the empty chair directly across from the Tycoon. She didn't fidget, but she didn't shrink either. Her presence alone unsettled them, more than any audit or quarterly review. The silence was unbearable. Finally, Carlyle cleared his throat and forced a smile so taut it looked painted on. "Well then," he began, "perhaps we should circle back to why we're here today." "Mr." He paused, unsure whether to use the Tycoon's actual name or remain vague. "You had some insights to share about your strategic review." The Tycoon didn't answer. Instead, he opened his slim, brushed metal laptop. The room dimmed slightly as the screen lit up. "I have one question before I invest another cent," he said, voice even. "What defines the culture of this company?" Carlyle brightened. "Glad you asked. We have quarterly inclusion seminars, 5 employee resource groups, and we just launched a mentorship program for underrepresented voices." The Tycoon raised one eyebrow, unimpressed. Kendra's gaze remained fixed on the wall ahead, where a tastefully abstract painting hung. Something blue and gold, meant to be modern but emotionally empty. He clicked a file on his laptop. A video began to play. It opened with grainy footage, a panel discussion from a UN Peace Summit. The date on the bottom right corner, June. The room leaned in. The video cut to a question and answer session. The voice asking the question was unmistakably Kendra's. Younger, slightly higher pitched, but assertive. Articulate. She challenged a senior UN diplomat on the inconsistencies between the translated version of a Syrian refugee report and the original Arabic. She cited page numbers. Cited the damage of misinformation. The camera panned to the panel. One of the men, Ambassador Gerald Langston, shifted in his seat uncomfortably. He gave a curt answer. The video cut again to an internal email. From Langston. Subject line KM, too many opinions. Body, watch this one. Brilliant, but becoming problematic. May need to review her final renewal. Gasps rippled through the room. The executives glanced at one another in muted horror, unsure if they were watching a scandal or a reckoning. Then another screen popped up. An internal memo stamped confidential, highlighted language suggesting Kendra's credentials were being reevaluated for neutrality, despite a spotless work record. The Tycoon paused the video. His voice dropped in volume but gained in impact. "This," he said, gesturing at the screen, "is why she mops your floors. Not because she lacked the intelligence or the drive, but because someone in a suit and tie decided that her truth was inconvenient." Kendra didn't move, didn't blink. Her silence screamed. Carlyle looked like he might faint. I had no idea. None of this is connected to our firm. We never." "But you did," the Tycoon interrupted. "You judged her. When she walked in, you questioned her right to be here. You labeled her just like he did. Not with a slur, with a doubt." He turned to Kendra. "Miss Miles, would you like to say something?" She took a breath. "I've cleaned this building for 7 years," she said quietly. "I've seen how you treat power, how you treat presence. You don't recognize it unless it comes in a tailored suit with the right skin tone and the right surname." No one interrupted. "You assumed I was invisible," she continued. "And when I wasn't, you assumed I was a fluke." She stood slowly, eyes scanning the faces of the men who had chuckled in the hallway not 30 minutes earlier. "You measure value with the wrong ruler." A single tear threatened at the corner of her eye, but she blinked it away. Then the Tycoon stood, laptop still open. He played one final clip. This one wasn't from the UN. It was from an internal HR email at Zenith Luxor, dated 4 months ago, regarding Kendra's reassignment from day to night shift. The justification doesn't interact well with executives. Occasionally makes them uncomfortable. Kendra inhaled sharply. She'd never seen that. Carlyle turned pale. "I didn't approve that," he said. But no one believed him, not even himself. The room went still. The Tycoon looked around, eyes hard as glass. "I am not here to buy your company. I'm here to assess your conscience." And today it failed. A long silence. Carlyle shifted uncomfortably. What happens now?" The Tycoon didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Kendra and smiled. "You're not done yet," he said. "There's something else you need to see." He typed a few keys. Another video loaded. Footage never before released of a closed-door UN meeting in Havana. A younger Kendra sits at a long oval table, speaking softly but firmly about the deliberate mistranslation of intelligence documents. Another man interrupts her mid-sentence. She stares him down. Then her name is mentioned again, this time followed by the word containment. Kendra stiffens. Before anyone can react, the screen glitches, then cuts to black. A red warning flashes across the laptop. "Intrusion detected, file corrupted, tracking source." The screen's warning pulsed red across the boardroom, throwing everyone's faces into a haunting glow. "Intrusion detected, file corrupted, tracking source." Then it all went black. Not just the video. The entire laptop shut down, as if suffocated from the inside. Kendra stared at the dead screen, her breath held hostage in her throat. Around her, the boardroom swelled with unease. Executives shifted in their seats, suddenly more nervous about cybersecurity than conscience. The Tycoon, however, was utterly still. His eyes remained locked on the now black laptop, lips pressed in a tight, unreadable line. It wasn't anger that simmered in him, it was confirmation. "You saw enough," he said finally, closing the laptop with a soft click that sounded louder than thunder. "And the part they tried to hide? That's the part that matters most." Kendra's voice came low, almost involuntarily. "They've been watching this feed in real time." He nodded. "They didn't expect it to resurface. And they never expected you to sit at this table again." The executives were confused. Most hadn't even processed what the footage had implied before it was cut. Carlyle leaned forward, his voice almost trembling. "What was that clip supposed to show?" The Tycoon turned his eyes on him, slow and deliberate. "The truth," he said. "The part you all pretend doesn't exist because it's not profitable." He stood, then walked slowly toward the window that looked out over the Manhattan skyline, hands clasped behind his back. The room, as large as it was, suddenly felt small, like a confessional. "That footage," he continued, "was from a closed UN strategy session in Havana. Kendra had raised concerns about a manipulated intelligence report, one used to justify arms intervention in Syria, specifically fabricated data tied to American contractors operating illegally under diplomatic cover." One of the executives scoffed lightly under his breath, as if the entire revelation were a movie script. The Tycoon heard it. He turned slowly. You find this amusing? The man blinked. It's just, that's a heavy accusation. Against the United Nations? Based on a 10-second clip? Kendra's voice came in. Precise. There were emails. I documented them. I was told to rewrite phrases that would shift the perception of risk. What was a warning in Arabic became an urgent justification in English. Those emails never made it to public record, she added, because Langston flagged me as biased. I wasn't neutral enough to translate his word. The scoffing executive smirked slightly. It's easy to say that now, with no proof, no witnesses. Kendra turned to him. Her gaze didn't waver. Do you know what happened in the northeast corridor of Aleppo on March 16, 2014? She asked calmly. He shrugged. A hospital was bombed. 17 children died. The coordinates provided to the Allied forces were based on humanitarian evacuation zones. Zones identified using manipulated field reports. Now his face twitched. I translated the original reports. I highlighted the discrepancy in Arabic syntax that proved the field agent was feeding bad intel. But someone higher up changed it. It was approved, sanctioned, sent, silent. She continued, her tone measured, but blade sharp. After I filed a formal complaint, I was assigned to remote postings. I was barred from embassy briefings. My badge was downgraded, and then my contract was re-evaluated. I was fired 2 weeks before my mother's chemotherapy approval went through. Carlyle leaned forward, suddenly unsure of his position. You never tried to take it public? I did, Kendra said. No one cared. It hit them like an invisible slap. The awareness that this brilliant, articulate woman, the one they dismissed as a janitor just an hour earlier, had once stood on global stages, translated between world leaders, and been silenced not because she was wrong, but because she was too right. The Tycoon turned to the executives. You should be asking yourselves why a woman like this was mopping your floors. Not because she lacked merit, but because someone ensured her voice was erased. Correction, Kendra said, eyes scanning the room. They tried to erase me, but I learned that even when they silence your microphone, you can still speak, with how you carry yourself, with what you refuse to become. She looked down at the mop still resting near the door. I've cleaned up after men like you for years, not just your coffee spills or scuffed floors, but your arrogance, your comfort, your entitlement to truth you didn't earn. An older white executive, Gregory Shull, shifted uncomfortably. His voice came thin and performative. Look, nobody here is saying you're not intelligent. We respect that you have a unique experience. Kendra raised an eyebrow. A unique experience? Gregory continued. I mean, you bring an important cultural perspective, but questioning the integrity of global institutions, based on personal fallout, might seem unhinged, she offered. No, he stammered. Just subjective. She stared at him like he'd just spoken in hieroglyphs. Then, without looking away, she began speaking in Arabic. Slowly, beautifully. The room fell silent again. Then she translated. Injustice spoken politely is still injustice. The Tycoon nodded approvingly. That's a line from Mahmoud Darwish, not just a poet, but a refugee, and one of the most censored voices in international politics. He looked at Gregory. She didn't just bring a perspective, she brought receipts. Kendra reached into her satchel and pulled out a thin, worn envelope. Inside were printed documents, original internal UN memos, stamped and dated. She passed them across the table. As the execs read in hushed disbelief, the room's atmosphere changed from defensive skepticism to horrified awe. Carlyle rubbed his temples. How did you even keep these? Kendra folded her hands. I didn't. My mother did. She believed I'd need them one day. She was right. The Tycoon finally returned to his seat. I came to this country looking to invest in leadership, he said. Not products, not trends, people. He pointed to Kendra. She is your first opportunity. But what do you mean by invest? Asked the CFO. I mean, he replied, that I am allocating $20 million, not into your firm, but into the development of a new ethics council. One built by people who were erased, whose integrity outlived their titles. He stood once more. And if this company doesn't support it, I pull my contracts. And I ensure everyone in your network knows why. Panic washed across the table. Carlyle's jaw clenched, and his voice dropped into a reluctant plea. Surely, you're not saying we lose everything over this one. Woman, the Tycoon finished. Carlyle shrank back. The Tycoon continued. No. Over your response to her. That's what tells me who you really are. The room deflated. No more arguments. No more justifications. A new tension filled the space. The sound of paradigms cracking. Just then the Tycoon's phone buzzed. He answered in Arabic. His expression changed. Not surprise. Something closer to revelation. He hung up, turned to Kendra. That was Dubai, he said. They want you on the next flight. First class. Kendra blinked. Why? They've seen the files. They've reviewed your record. There's a seat waiting for you at a confidential summit. Leadership. Reform. Rebuilding what's broken. She sat back, stunned. Just like that? The Tycoon nodded. Just like that. As Kendra reached for her phone to text her niece the news, a new notification lit up her screen. One line. You leave the country, and Havana won't be the only secret we expose. Kendra stepped out of the Zenith Luxor building and into the grit-sweet air of Manhattan, the weight of the Tycoon's final words still lingering on her skin like the burn of a fresh slap. She walked past the revolving doors like she had 100 times before, but this time she wasn't pushing a mop cart. She wasn't invisible. She wasn't silent. And yet the message on her phone pulsed like a fresh wound in her pocket. You leave the country, and Havana won't be the only secret we expose. Her pace slowed as she turned the corner past the espresso bar that never once served her without side eyes, past the glass facade of the Global Futures tech firm, where she'd once applied and received the automated rejection within 4 hours. She didn't take the private car the Tycoon had offered, not yet. She needed to feel ground under her feet, needed to remind herself that her story had started on cracked sidewalks, not in boardrooms with glass chandeliers. The further she walked, the more the skyscrapers gave way to chain-link fences, and the polished silence of Midtown transformed into the chatter, sirens and heartbeat of the Bronx. Her Bronx, a different kind of wealth, lived here. Gritty, tired, invisible. She passed a brick wall covered in new posters. Job fair, diversity first. Inclusive future now. Kendra smirked, bitterly. She'd seen these before. She had once stood in line for hours at one. She'd worn a navy suit and held a resume so clean you could eat off it. She remembered the white woman in front of her being asked about interests and hobbies, while Kendra was asked, "Do you have your own transportation?" She had smiled through it all, even when the recruiter squinted and asked if she could translate Swahili, Arabic and Farsi. Yes, but not everything black was Africa. Not everything foreign was exotic. As she walked, her mind traveled backward without permission. Flashbacks didn't ask to be relived. They just arrived, like echoes with a vendetta. Warren. The briefing room was icy with air conditioning, and worse with politics. Kendra sat at the far end of the table, among men in tailored blazers and women with clipped accents and zero patience. She had translated an Iranian professor's written testimony, a sensitive document alleging fabricated weapons intel. But when she spoke, a gray-haired ambassador from London cut her off before the second sentence. I believe we've already reviewed this segment, he said flatly, flipping pages he hadn't read. Kendra looked at the Arabic notes again. Respectfully, Ambassador, you've been given the English version. The Farsi original includes nuance. The UN official beside her, Langston, placed a firm hand on her arm. We've made a decision, he said. Let's not confuse the conversation. She went silent. Not because she agreed, but because she knew the real conversation wasn't happening in that room. It happened in reports rewritten after hours. It happened in budget meetings. In briefings she was barred from because classified suddenly meant not for black translators. And then came her mother's voice, uninvited but welcome, like an old record spinning at the back of her brain. Use your mind, even if they bury it. Dolores Miles had said that from her hospital bed, wrapped in a threadbare pink blanket, and courage she could barely afford. Cancer had thinned her body, but her voice stayed steel. Kendra remembered holding her hand as IV bags dripped quietly nearby. What if the world doesn't listen? Then speak louder, her mother had said, eyes gleaming. Or whisper in a language they don't know. Back in her Bronx apartment, the lock clicked behind her with the familiarity of survival. The space was small, but meticulously kept. A narrow bookshelf held everything from Rumi to Toni Morrison, to declassified CIA documents she'd collected out of sheer spite. She towed off her shoes and headed to the kitchen, the floor creaking under her weight. Her niece, Alea, wouldn't be home for another few hours, still at her after-school coding program. Kendra had raised her since her sister's shooting in 2008. She didn't just protect Alea, she planned for her. As she opened the fridge, her eye caught something on the counter. An envelope. No stamp, no name, just her name written in tight handwriting. Kendra approached it with a strange mix of suspicion and dread. She slid it open with a butter knife. Inside was a letter, handwritten, familiar and shaking in rhythm. Her breath caught. It was from Marta Cedeno, a Cuban linguist she'd trained with during her UN years. They had worked closely in Syria. Marta had vanished after Kendra was terminated. No explanations, no contact, just disappeared. The letter was short. Apologetic. Haunted. Kendra, they told me I had to choose. It wasn't you. It was them or survival. But I kept a copy of the Havana report, the real one, with your edits.
I couldn't send it digitally. They're monitoring everything. But I know someone who can get it to you safely.
Forgive me. I was scared. Marta enclosed a single flash drive in red plastic casing. No label. Nothing fancy. Kendra held it like it was nuclear. Suddenly, a soft knock at the door. She froze. Another knock, this time paired with a British accented voice. Ms. Miles, my name is Ezra. I'm with the Tycoon's delegation. May I have a moment? Kendra glanced through the peephole. A clean-shaven man in a charcoal suit stood politely, holding an envelope in one hand and an electronic tablet in the other. Behind him, a sleek black Mercedes idled at the curb. Kendra opened the door slightly. The chain still latched. Ezra smiled softly. He requests your presence at JFK. The flight leaves in 3 hours. First class. You'll be met on the other side. She didn't open the door wider, but she studied him. Do you know what this is about? She asked. Only that you're needed, in a room most people will never be allowed to enter. She shut the door just long enough to grab the flash drive and shove it into a sock inside her carry-on. When she stepped outside minutes later, the sky was starting to darken. Streetlights flickered on like old memories. Ezra held the car door for her. You're doing the right thing, Miss Miles. I'm not sure what that means anymore, she replied. Then, you're exactly the kind of person who should be in that room, he said. The ride to JFK was quiet. Kendra sat with her hands folded, her mind racing with impossible questions. Was this a setup? Had they gotten to Marta? Was the summit a trap? At the airport, a VIP attendant escorted her past security lines into a private terminal lounge. She felt out of place. Not because of what she wore, but because the space felt like it was designed to filter out people who looked like her. She sipped a glass of water, trying not to think about her phone buzzing in her bag. Flight 77 Gate 6. Boarding now. Kendra stood slowly. One step, then another. She walked down the jet bridge as the distant rumble of aircraft engines echoed like a war drum. Then, right before she reached the boarding door, 2 men stepped forward. Dark suits, hard faces, crisp badges. Federal Bureau of Investigation, the taller one said, flashing credentials. We need to ask you a few questions before you board. Passengers behind her murmured in confusion. The attendant tensed. Kendra blinked. What is this about? The shorter agent's eyes were flat. You are under informal investigation for possible connections to foreign intelligence entities. You can come with us voluntarily, or the rest of his sentence never made it out. Because just then, Ezra appeared beside them, this time holding a phone. He handed it to the taller agent.
There's a call for you.
From the State Department. The agent hesitated. Answer. Silence. Then his eyes changed. Posture softened. He handed the phone back and stepped aside. You're clear to go, ma'am, he said tightly. Kendra blinked. She stepped forward, boarding pass in hand, unsure whether she just dodged a bullet or stepped into a deeper fire. As she found her seat and fastened her belt, a flight attendant approached with a note. Just 6 words. This plane is not just yours. The paper note trembled slightly in Kendra's hand. Just 6 words, scrawled in sharp black ink. This plane is not just yours. She read it again, then looked up slowly. The flight attendant was already gone, leaving behind the sterile quiet of the first-class cabin. A glass of water shimmered gently on the tray beside her seat, the ice clinking in the silence. The lights overhead dimmed as boarding continued, each passenger filing in like actors on a stage. None of them fully understood. Kendra's skin crawled. The message wasn't just a warning. It was a chess move. She looked around, not obviously, not like someone paranoid, but like someone trained to notice inconsistencies. An older man in a cashmere coat took a seat 2 rows ahead. A woman with a floral scarf and a government-issued laptop walked by without making eye contact. A man in a TSA-branded duffel bag sat directly across the aisle, arms too still, eyes too empty. They weren't all passengers. She could feel it in her marrow. Just then, the cockpit door opened. 2 men in suits, not flight attendants, stepped inside the cabin. Their walk too uniform, too rehearsed. One carried a briefcase. The other glanced around the cabin like he was taking inventory. Kendra's hands gripped the armrests, her mind racing. She considered pressing the call button, saying something, anything. But what? That she was being followed? That someone had planted an intelligence team on a commercial route under the guise of diplomacy? The cabin door had barely sealed when a voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain in your seats. There's been a brief delay due to airspace coordination with DC. And there it was. The phrase wasn't standard. It was coded, meant for someone listening who knew what it meant. She reached for her phone, but it was already out of signal range, grounded, monitored. Before she could decide whether to stand or stay silent, the cabin door burst open again. 2 FBI agents, unmistakable in plain dark suits, stepped inside, their badges flashing like sabers in the artificial light. Kendra Miles? One called out, voice loud and confident. Please step off the plane. We need a moment of your time. Passengers turned. Whispers started. A steward stepped forward but was immediately blocked by the second agent. Kendra didn't move. I'm not under arrest, she said firmly. You don't have a warrant. You're under federal suspicion, the lead agent replied, voice colder now. Potential involvement with foreign intelligence entities. National security implications. We can do this the easy way, or we can escalate. The air around her seemed to bend. Kendra slowly stood, her voice like a scalpel. This is racial profiling, in its most polished form. You waited until the door was sealed. Until I was on foreign-bound soil. And now you use national security to scare me into silence. Ma'am, I want a lawyer, she cut in. Now, I invoke counsel under the Sixth Amendment. But they didn't flinch. One of them gestured toward the front of the plane. Step outside. This isn't a negotiation. Kendra turned her head, and that's when she saw him. The Tycoon. He was already walking down the jet bridge, crisp in a black thobe and tailored blazer, his face calm but unreadable. His presence shifted the air. The agents hesitated. He stopped in front of them, looked at Kendra, then at both agents. No smile, no fear. Then he spoke in Arabic. A long, fluid sentence that made both men stiffen. They didn't understand it, but they understood the tone. One agent reached for his radio. The Tycoon stepped closer to the lead agent, pulled a slim phone from his pocket, and made a call. He said 4 sentences in Arabic, slowly, calmly, then handed the phone to the agent. The agent frowned, but took the device. 10 seconds into the call, his posture changed. Eyes widened, jaw tensed. He handed the phone back with both hands. We were given orders, he said, voice suddenly formal. We didn't know. The Tycoon cut him off. Now you do. The other agent tried to recover. We were following a DC memo. There was a red flag, unverified chatter linking her to foreign language channels. She speaks 6 languages, the Tycoon said coolly. Being multilingual is not a crime. Unless you're black in America. The silence landed like a bomb. Kendra hadn't moved. Her heart thundered behind her ribs, but her eyes stayed steady. 15 minutes later, after what felt like an eternity, the agent stepped back. No apology, just silence and averted eyes. You're clear to fly, the taller one muttered. Kendra turned to the Tycoon. Did you just call someone in Langley? She asked. He didn't answer immediately. Then, I called someone who outranks the paranoia. She returned to her seat. He followed, taking the one beside her. The plane finally pushed back from the gate, engines rumbling like an angry promise. 30 minutes into the air, the cabin lights dimmed, and the plane stabilized. The Tycoon poured himself a glass of water and leaned back. You handled that with precision, he said. I've been profiled more times than I've eaten breakfast this year, she replied, voice sharp. He didn't flinch. Do you know what they were afraid of? Me, she said dryly. No, what you represent. Intelligence that doesn't obey, dignity that doesn't apologize. She turned to him. Let me ask you something. He nodded. What now? You parade me around Dubai? Make me your success story? A trophy? There was no bitterness in her voice, just calculation. You want me to be your token. He didn't respond at first. Then, quietly, I want you to be my judge. She blinked. Excuse me? He leaned forward. I've built empires, but the world doesn't need more empires. It needs mirrors. Truth tellers. You've seen the systems from the inside. You know how they bury integrity under red tape and smiles. Kendra looked away. You don't need me to be your judge, she said. You need me to tell you what you don't want to hear. He smiled faintly. Exactly. The silence stretched. Heavy but purposeful. After a while, Kendra reclined her seat and stared at the ceiling. Every room I walk into, I have to prove I belong, she whispered. And now you're offering me a room where people will try to prove they don't. He didn't respond, but his eyes said everything. As the plane descended into the glimmering lights of Dubai, the captain's voice crackled through the cabin. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be landing shortly. We've received a special clearance for tarmac disembarkment. Please remain seated. Kendra peered out the window. Below, a convoy of blacked-out SUVs lined the private runway like sentinels. A red carpet unrolled between them, and the aircraft's final stop. She looked at the Tycoon. He was already buttoning his jacket. You still want to walk through that door? He asked. She hesitated. Then, only if I get to build the next one. As the plane touched down, one SUV door swung open early, and a familiar face stepped out. It was Marta Cedeno. Alive, and visibly terrified. The air in Dubai wasn't hot. It was commanding. It wrapped around Kendra like a warning, and a promise. As she stepped down the private staircase from the aircraft, the tarmac lights burned like halos on concrete. The convoy of SUVs stood rigid, black and gleaming, each vehicle a reflection of silent power. But it wasn't the cars that stopped Kendra mid-step. It was her, Marta Cedeno. Hair shorter, eyes darker, shoulders hunched, not with age, but with burden. Marta didn't run to Kendra. She didn't cry. She just stared, and in that stare lived every betrayal, every unsent message, every risk that had never died. Kendra stepped forward slowly, heart lodged in her throat. You're alive, she said, softly. Marta gave a hollow nod, barely, and with that they were swept into the cars. The drive to the compound was silent but not empty. Kendra sat beside the Tycoon, Marta behind her. Through tinted windows, the desert unfolded in shades of myth. Sand dunes smooth as silk, horizon lines that blurred into gold. The convoy turned off the main road and descended a steep slope toward what looked like nothing, until it wasn't. The facility appeared like a mirage, a series of angular sandstone-colored structures that blended perfectly into the landscape. There were no logos, no guards visible, just precision and purpose. The moment the SUV stopped, a man in a white linen tunic opened Kendra's door. He bowed slightly. Welcome to Almeria. Kendra stepped out, pulse steady but cautious. The name meant the mirror. The compound was minimalism, married to ancient architecture. Corridors carved into stone, domes with slit windows, water channels running silently beneath open courtyards. But what struck Kendra most were the walls. Every hallway bore etched quotes. Not in gold, but in burnished obsidian. They buried us, but they didn't know we were seeds. Native proverb. I am deliberate and afraid of nothing. Audre Lorde. Every tyrant's fear is a voice that refuses to shut up. Mahmoud Darwish. They passed rooms that felt more like altars, libraries without labels, maps without borders, a chamber of silence where only the hum of wind and thought could exist. Inside the largest dome, they were greeted not by bodyguards but by minds. The Tycoon led her into a circular chamber. At its center was a table made of compressed earth and steel. Around it sat 7 figures, each of whom looked up as Kendra entered. The room fell still. This, the Tycoon said, is the council. The first to rise was an older woman, her gray locks tied neatly, eyes fierce behind horn-rimmed glasses. She extended a hand. Dr. Ama Okonkwo, she said, human rights historian, formerly disappeared by Nigerian military tribunals. Next was a man in beaded turquoise jewelry. His skin bore the deep lines of age, but his back was impossibly straight. Professor James Red Elk. Pine Ridge Nation. Wrongfully imprisoned for 27 years. Cleared by DNA. Never apologized to. Then came a younger person. Tall, poised, eyes lined in deep kohl. Layla Haddad. Trans refugee. Escaped state prosecution in Jordan. Built underground networks for asylum seekers. They went on. A blind Palestinian economist who'd survived 13 raids. A Brazilian mother who brought down a corrupt mining syndicate after her daughter was buried alive in a mudslide. Kendra didn't speak. She couldn't. Her breath sat still beneath her ribs. These are not employees, the Tycoon said, standing behind her. They are survivors who chose to architect the next era. You're not being hired, Kendra. She turned to him. You're being invited. Dinner was not a feast. It was sustenance. A long table under the open sky, lit by suspended orbs that swayed gently in the wind. No servants. No hierarchy. Everyone served each other. Marta sat across from Kendra, not eating. I wanted to reach out, she said finally, voice fragile. But they threatened my family, and I was afraid that if I surfaced, they'd come for you too. Kendra sipped her tea. They did. I thought I had time to fix it. To get proof. But then I saw what Langston had done to you. How the system erased you so fast. Kendra nodded. He wasn't the only one. But he was the beginning. I saved the Havana footage, Marta whispered. The unedited version. On 3 drives. One of them was intercepted. But 2 remain. I brought one with me. Kendra reached across the table and gently took Marta's hand. I'm not angry with you, she said. You stayed alive. That's resistance too. Before Marta could reply, a quiet bell chimed. It was time. Back in the council chamber, the Tycoon placed a leather folio in front of Kendra. Her name was engraved on it. Inside her first assignment. She opened it with the reverence of someone unwrapping truth. The file inside bore a title that stole her breath. Gerald Langston. Internal Integrity Review. Preliminary Dossier. Her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the pages. There were transcripts, financial anomalies, testimonies, surveillance logs from his final year as a senior UN official. A web of manipulations that extended far beyond her own case. The dossier concluded with a stark sentence. Recommendation pending Kendra Miles' evaluation. She looked up slowly. Her voice barely held. You want me to decide what happens to him? The Tycoon nodded. This isn't revenge. This is precedent. We don't destroy reputations. We measure them. And we use the truth as the yardstick. Professor Red Elk leaned forward. He isn't just your past. He's still shaping futures. His reports are used in global policy to this day. Dr. Amma added. If you remain silent, his narrative becomes permanent. Kendra closed the file and sat back. The silence that followed was thick with expectation. She felt the weight of every word ever silenced in her throat. I want to speak with him, she said. The room reacted. A collective inhale. I need to look him in the eyes, she continued. Not as his subordinate, not as his colored translator, but as the one he couldn't erase. Marta looked at her, fear creeping in. He'll lie. I don't need him to tell the truth, Kendra said. I need him to hear mine. The Tycoon nodded solemnly. Then we'll arrange it. As the council began to disperse, Kendra's tablet buzzed. A new message appeared from an encrypted channel she hadn't seen before. He knows you're here. He's already responding. Attached, a video clip. Gerald Langston, on a private yacht, looking directly into the camera. Kendra, this won't end the way you think. Kendra sat alone in the glass-walled chamber, overlooking the arid hills that surrounded the compound. Morning light poured in from above, illuminating every page of the dossier she had opened, every line a splinter from a truth long buried. The top folder was labeled Audio Evidence, Internal Briefings, Langston G. She inserted the encrypted flash drive into the secure terminal. No passwords. No firewalls. This system trusted her alone. The first recording crackled into life. Langston's voice filled the room, crisp and smug. We can't trust her. You think she's just a translator. But I've read her notes. She interprets tone, subtext, emotion. It's dangerous. These people, they think context is rebellion. The second voice responded, laughing faintly. You mean black people or Arabs? Langston's reply was instant. Either. Both. Pick a vowel. The laughter deepened. Then the sound of a clink glass hitting glass. Rewrite her edits. Filter it through DC optics. Use the unstable intelligence excuse if anyone asks. The audio cut. Kendra stared at the screen, bile rising in her throat. The room around her remained still, but her internal temperature surged. There it was. Proof. Unfiltered, undeniable, unsanitized. Not just systemic racism, strategic racism, policy-grade prejudice. She clicked the next file. Langston again. Different day. Same arrogance. This whole Syria campaign. We're not saving anyone. We're managing narratives. If we show too many dark-skinned refugees, Americans stop watching. If we show enough sand, they think we're helping. The words were weapons, sharp and smug, delivered with the confidence of a man who thought he'd never be recorded. Kendra closed the file and sat back. Her hands were shaking. Not from fear, from restraint. She walked slowly through the compound's inner garden, carefully cultivated between sunlit stone paths and the whisper of water from an underground aqueduct. She sat on a bench beneath a fig tree, its branches heavy with fruit. And there, uninvited but welcome, came the memories. Her mother, Dolores. Breath shallow, bones wrapped in thin skin. A hospital gown open at the collar. "You can't fix the world, baby," she had whispered. "But don't you dare let it swallow you." Kendra had been holding her hand, 28 years old, halfway through the worst year of her life. You were born knowing the difference between noise and voice. Don't let them turn you into background sound. Her niece, Alea, 8 years old, sitting on the apartment floor, flipping through a Harvard alumni magazine. Her voice, clear and hopeful. "Auntie, if you used to be smart, why do people treat you like you're not?" Kendra hadn't answered. She couldn't, because the truth wasn't simple. She was still smart, but smartness without access became invisible, and genius, when black and disobedient, became a liability. Back in the garden, Kendra opened her laptop. She didn't tremble anymore. She clicked into the secured network the Tycoon's tech team had provided. 10 international media channels. Europe, Asia, Africa, South America sat waiting for a feed. She opened a document, titled "Truth Without Permission," by Kendra Miles. She typed the first line, "My name is Kendra Miles, and I was erased because I refused to lie in the language of power." She kept going. Her fingers moved like fire across the keys. She wrote about Havana, about the redacted warnings, about children who died because fabricated translations justified military strikes. She wrote about the coded language used to dehumanize refugees. She quoted Langston verbatim, attaching time-stamped recordings as footnotes. No edits, no interpretations, just truth. And then she included something no one expected: her own complicity. "There were moments," she wrote, "when I stayed quiet, when I softened my tone to survive the meeting, when I adjusted translations not to lie, but to protect myself. I regret every one." This is not an exposé, it's a confession of the price we pay to be safe, and the cost of finally deciding to be free. An hour later, she uploaded the speech into the media feed. The channels went into countdown mode. She would be live in 6 minutes. The council gathered around her slowly, reverently, without spectacle. Professor Red Elk placed a quiet hand on her shoulder. "Whatever happens, they can't put the truth back in the bottle." Layla offered a tablet. "Live metrics. The moment you go on, 10 million viewers minimum." Dr. Amma stepped forward. "The blowback will be real. They'll label you, isolate you, try to discredit you." Kendra smiled slightly. "I've already lived through that. This time they'll have to face me out loud." The Tycoon entered last. He didn't speak, just nodded, stood beside her, and handed her a final document. A contract. Blank signature line. "Founding member, Global Ethics Review Council." At the bottom, "Permanent veto power." She folded the paper and placed it beside her laptop. "I'll sign it," she said. After the speech, he smiled. "That's fair." She turned back to the screen. 1 minute left. She took a breath, deep and centered. The final seconds ticked down.
What?
Then her tablet buzzed sharply. An urgent message from the secure feed monitor. "Alert. Incoming media advisory from UN authority." Before she could open it, a second alert hit. UN Security Division issues global bulletin. Kendra Miles designated as foreign agent of misinformation. Silent. The words blinked on her screen, like fire alarms. Kendra blinked. "Read it again." Layla gasped softly. Professor Red Elk growled. "They're criminalizing the truth." The Tycoon's jaw locked. "They're trying to make you untrustworthy before you even speak." Kendra stared at the advisory, her fingers frozen just above the Go Live button. It was psychological warfare, designed to kill the credibility before it could take breath. Marta appeared behind her. "They're scared," she whispered. "They're only this loud when they know they've lost the quiet war." Kendra nodded slowly, her voice low and firm. "They want me to blink. So I won't." She pressed go live. The screen filled with her face, serene, fierce, centered. She opened her mouth. But before she could say the first word, all 10 media feeds blacked out simultaneously. Her screen went dark. And then a new alert. Feed terminated, coordinated interference detected from multiple state actors. In the corner of the screen, an icon blinked. Unidentified hacker source requesting private feed. The blackout hung in the room like a chokehold. The moment Kendra hit go live, every feed had snapped to black. 10 countries, dozens of servers, thousands of preloaded streams gone. Like a curtain pulled before the first line of a revolution. Her screen blinked with the final warning. Unidentified hacker source requesting private feed. For a long breath, no one moved. Layla hovered beside her. They've severed you from the grid. The UN has state-level partners. They coordinated it. Professor Red Elk cursed under his breath. That wasn't just censorship. That was strategy. They knew your story would spread faster than their spin. Kendra didn't flinch. She looked at the blinking icon. Private feed request. Trace it, she asked. Layla nodded, fingers flying across her tablet. Encrypted. But it's bouncing through Stockholm, Dakar, Seoul. Wait there. That's the base node. Geneva. Kendra's pulse slowed. The UN headquarters. Layla's eyes widened. That's internal. The Tycoon stood behind them, silent until now. It could be bait. Or Kendra said, it's the only window left open. She tapped the icon. The feed flickered, loaded, and then suddenly her own face reappeared on screen. Pixelated but live. Except this wasn't through any media outlet.
This was underground.
Anonymous avatars filled the interface. Thousands. Then tens of thousands. Then over 400,000 live viewers. A digital flood. Someone had built an alternate pipeline, ghost infrastructure, hidden beneath the web. At the top of the screen, a message flashed. Speak. We'll amplify. Kendra stared into the camera.
This time there were no scripts, no legal advisors, no press handlers.
Only the truth. And her voice. My name is Kendra Miles. I'm a former UN translator, a Harvard graduate, a whistleblower, and a janitor.
The chat exploded.
But Kendra didn't stop. I worked in corridors, where peace was negotiated, and lies were manufactured in the same breath. I translated for world leaders who looked me in the eye, and called me invisible before I spoke. I was erased because I refused to dilute truth for the comfort of empire. She pulled up the first document, Langston's email, calling her dangerous for preserving cultural nuance. This man helped justify military action in Syria, using mistranslated intelligence. Children died. Cities crumbled. And he called it diplomacy. Then the audio file played. Langston's voice. If we show too many dark-skinned refugees, Americans stop watching. The viewers heard it. They didn't just believe it. They felt it. She went deeper. Page after page. Memo after memo. She overlaid maps, showed timelines, matched military actions to media lies. Then she paused, and brought the story home. When I was 8, she said, I watched my mother explain to a white landlord why our heat hadn't been working all winter. He told her she must have left the windows open. That lie cost us 2 hospital visits, and my childhood. She clicked to an image of Emmett Till's open casket. Truth didn't protect him. Next, a redacted COINTELPRO document describing how to neutralize Martin Luther King Jr. with character attacks. Justice has never been blind. It's been instructed to look away. Next, a photo of her niece, Alea, asleep at her desk with Arabic vocabulary cards stuck to her cheek. This is who I protect when I speak. She closed the file and leaned forward. I don't want revenge. I want repair. I want every system that claims to protect the world to prove it can withstand the truth. The chat burst into flames. Listen to Kendra. Justice in Arabic. UN truth. Within minutes, Twitch streams were simulcasting her feed. TikTok creators looped her quotes into rapid edits. Journalists begged for interviews. Public figures from musicians to scholars retweeted her monologue with stunned admiration. Across continents, people tuned in not just to hear her, but to feel seen by her. The silence she had once been drowned in was now replaced with a rising, furious choir. But just as her words reached their crescendo, Kendra noticed something strange. The Tycoon was gone. He had been beside her minutes ago, watching, arms folded, a protective force, now vanished. Marta stepped in. He got a call. Didn't say from who. Kendra frowned. He didn't leave a message? Only one sentence, Marta said. If they silence her again, release Protocol 9. Kendra looked at the screen. Over 3.2 million live viewers, and rising. That night, protesters flooded the front steps of the UN building in New York. Thousands held signs. We translate the truth now. Kendra Miles is not invisible. Silence is structural violence. Outside the Geneva headquarters, diplomats refused to speak to the press. Inside, leaks erupted. Anonymous hackers, some suspected to be from the same underground network that had saved Kendra's stream, began publishing classified UN memos, redacted names, suppressed war crime testimonies, footnotes edited to erase racial identifiers. The UN issued a statement. We are investigating the source of these documents. We do not comment on internal reviews. The irony echoed across headlines like a scream in a library. Back at the compound, Kendra sat in her chamber, eyes bloodshot from screen glare. The council had agreed. This was no longer a leak. It was an unmasking. She'd heard nothing from the Tycoon for 2 days. No message. No signals. She considered that perhaps this was always his plan, that he would launch her into orbit, then vanish, free from the blast radius. But that thought evaporated when a new message appeared. No name. Just a symbol. A crescent embedded within a mirrored triangle. Subject line, we met once, inside the archive. Before they erased you. Kendra opened it. Inside. Only coordinates. And the time. 3:07 a.m. Dubai time. Below it, one line. I'm inside the UN, and I know where the original tapes are. She reread the message 3 times. The symbol. The timing. The reference to the archive. It all aligned. This wasn't a crank email, or a breadcrumb for sabotage. This was real. She stood and called Layla and Dr. Amma into the chamber. They read the message in silence. Amma finally spoke. If this is real, it's the foundation stone. The one piece they couldn't scrub. Layla warned. They could be baiting you. To trap or discredit you. Kendra nodded. But what if they're not? She paced slowly. The echoes of her own footsteps a metronome of rising danger. I need to know, she said finally, if what I lived through was just a crack, or if it's the entire blueprint. Professor Red Elk joined them, holding a weathered tablet. We mapped those coordinates, he said. It's a side entrance to a UN secure data vault in Dubai. That specific access point hasn't been used in over 5 years, Marta added. There's only one reason someone would use that entrance. To avoid being logged, Kendra finished. They all looked at each other. Then she said, I'm going. Emma grabbed her arm. Then you go armed. Not with weapons, but with backup. Kendra nodded. I'll go alone. But I won't go unprepared. At exactly 3:07 a.m., Kendra stepped through the unmarked steel door in the underground UN vault, only to find a flashlight beam already waiting for her. Then a voice from the shadows whispered,
You're not the only one who was erased.
The flashlight beam hovered just below Kendra's chest, unwavering and cold. She squinted through the low-lit corridor of the underground vault, heart a steady drumbeat in her chest. The silence pressed in like a physical weight. Then the voice came again. You're not the only one who was erased. It wasn't a threat. It was a lament. The flashlight lowered. A figure stepped forward, slender, short, draped in a loose blazer over a black turtleneck. Their face was youthful, but drawn, the skin beneath their eyes hollowed by sleepless years. I was an intern, they said. UN Office of Internal Language Review. 2015. You don't know me, but I knew you. Kendra didn't blink. How? I translated your flagged edits back into Arabic. I thought it was standard protocol. Then I found out your corrections were being reversed. Deliberately. Not because they were wrong, but because they told the truth too clearly. The intern stepped further into view. A name tag still clung to the strap of their satchel. Nicole Fett. I leaked your Havana tapes, Nicole admitted softly. The unedited ones. Kendra exhaled slowly. You saved my life. Nicole shook their head. I tried, but you weren't the only one they came after. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Not digital, not hackable, paper, fragile. Proof that had survived only because it couldn't be traced electronically. Inside were names, dozens of them.
Black translators, editors, cultural liaisons, language specialists across field offices in Haiti, Ethiopia, Lebanon, and South Sudan. All ousted. Quietly, records expunged or marked voluntary resignation.
Kendra leafed through the documents in stunned silence. These people weren't fired for poor performance, Nicole explained. They were blacklisted because their linguistic fidelity didn't fit political agendas. When they preserved regional dialects, it was called radicalizing. When white staff did it, it was called inclusive translation. Kendra's jaw clenched. How long has this been going on? Decades. But post-2010, it escalated. The global rise in nationalist rhetoric forced the UN to present unified messaging. That meant silencing voices that translated with nuance, especially Black and Arab voices. Kendra stepped back. This was never just about me. Nicole nodded. You were the spark. But they built the fire long before. The next morning, the sun scorched the desert clean. Kendra stood before the council. I want a full audit, she said, voice level. Not of one man. Of the entire Language Integrity Division. Geneva, Nairobi, New York. Dr. Amma raised an eyebrow. That would shake diplomatic foundations. You're talking about confronting governments, not just bureaucrats. I know. Professor Red Elk folded his arms. We have the data. But if we move too fast, we risk undermining the council's access. They've already declared me a foreign agent, Kendra replied. What more are we protecting? Silence fell. Layla finally broke it. What about the Tycoon? He hasn't surfaced, Amma answered. But if he initiated Protocol 9, it means he's authorized you, fully. Kendra stepped forward, gripping the edge of the stone table. We're not just exposing corruption, she said. We're excavating rot, systemic rot, hidden behind humanitarian logos and mission statements. She dropped Nicole's folder onto the table. This isn't a story anymore. It's a reckoning. The council voted. 5-2. Audit approved. Limited scope. Internal access only. Data secured through encrypted channels provided by Layla's underground network. It was a win, but a fragile one. And Kendra knew fragile victories were often dressed as targets. That evening, as dusk rolled in like a sigh, Kendra returned to her suite inside the compound. Her tablet sat on the desk, blinking with messages. She tapped into the secure inbox. Amid requests for interviews, podcast invites, and thank you notes from around the world. One message stood out. Subject line, we see you. No sender, no footer, just one sentence. This little niece of yours, she loves Tuesdays. Robotics club, right?
Below it, Alea's full school schedule, bus stop times, pickup routes.
Kendra's stomach dropped. Her hand flew to her chest, searching for breath that had fled her. The world around her dimmed, the room shrinking as the protective walls of the compound suddenly felt like glass. She reread it again. Not a warning. A declaration. They hadn't just come for her career. They were reaching for her bloodline. She stormed into the council chamber without knocking. I need secure extraction, she said. Layla stood instantly. What happened? Kendra threw the tablet down. They threatened my niece. Red Elk cursed. Emma went silent. We can move her, Layla said. Change her name. Private transport. But if they know her school schedule, someone's feeding them from inside. You think there's a mole? I think nothing digital is sacred anymore. Kendra's hands trembled. She's 17. She's memorizing Arabic flashcards and building drones with tin foil. She's not a liability. She's my future. The room stilled. Professor Red Elk walked to a drawer and pulled out a slim old-school radio. This has no satellite link. No Wi-Fi. I'll connect her directly to our secure node in Montana. She'll be off-grid in 48 hours. Kendra's voice cracked. I want her somewhere no translation can betray. You'll have it, he promised. Later that night, alone again, Kendra sat on her balcony overlooking the desert. Her fingers idly traced the spine of a notebook filled with drafts of her speeches. She didn't cry. She strategized. Because pain in her hands was never passive. She opened her journal and wrote one sentence. If they're willing to silence a child to save a lie, then truth has already won. Just then her phone buzzed with an incoming call. Unlisted, but familiar. The Tycoon, she answered. I assume you've seen the vote, she said. I have. His voice came through, calm and unreadable. You gave me your platform. I've used it. Now they're coming for my family. His silence said more than his words. She leaned forward. I need you to return. I will, he said, when you finish what you started. And the line went dead. The next morning, Kendra sent an encrypted message to Nicole. Activate the secondary protocol. I'm no longer requesting. I'm reporting. Attached her niece's redacted location plan. Nicole replied instantly. Understood. She's protected. You focus on the fire. Kendra looked out at the horizon, dust rising like smoke in the wind. Then she turned to the mirror, spoke softly. I'm not afraid of what they'll do. I'm afraid of what happens if I stay quiet. Moments later, a courier arrived at the compound gates, unmarked envelope in hand. Inside, a photo, taken from a rooftop, of Kendra, standing in the courtyard. Caption written in block letters. We don't miss twice. The photo was grainy but unmistakable. Kendra, caught mid-step in the courtyard of the Dubai compound, her figure outlined against the sand-colored stone, her posture alert but unaware. We don't miss twice. The caption wasn't printed. It was scrawled. In permanent black marker, like a sentence handed down by someone who didn't bother hiding anymore. She didn't scream. She didn't run to security. She folded the photo, slid it into her pocket, and turned on her heel. 3 hours later, Kendra was airborne back on a private jet, this time charting a direct course for New York. She didn't care about the optics. Not the council's warnings. Not the global momentum surging behind her name. Her niece came first. The wheels hit JFK tarmac just past midnight. A black SUV was already waiting. Inside, Layla sat with a burner phone and a forged school dismissal letter. She leaves through the back exit, Layla said. Uniforms are paid off. We have a 12-minute window before attendance systems flag her as missing. Kendra nodded, her hands tight around the steering wheel. 12 minutes. That was all the world had ever given her. To be heard, to be whole, to be home. The car peeled away from the curb, disappearing into the folds of Brooklyn's early morning shadows. Alea didn't ask questions. She slid into the back seat with her hoodie drawn tight, backpack already half-zipped. She didn't cry. She just looked at her aunt with that impossible mix of fear and faith. Kendra glanced at her in the mirror. I'm sorry, she whispered. Alea met her gaze. For what? You're doing what Mom did. Kendra's throat tightened. She fought until the system shot back. Alea added. You're just doing it louder. The safe house was in Harlem, tucked above a shuttered jazz bar that once hosted legends before gentrification gutted the block. The walls were thick, the Wi-Fi was offline, the windows were barred, but the bookshelves were full. Kendra unpacked a few essentials. Burner phones, encryption tablets, Alea's Arabic vocabulary cards, and the flash drive from Marta, just in case. They didn't speak much the first day. Just settled into a rhythm of silence, of breathing inside a fortress of distrust. Kendra cooked. Alea studied. And the world, outside, kept shifting. By the second day, the headlines broke. UN official Gerald Langston steps down amid health concerns. No comment from Geneva, as a litigations mount. Whistleblower speech sparks global translation integrity movement. Kendra stared at the TV, Alea beside her. Langston's image, pristine as ever, flashed across the screen. A man draped in sympathy, praised for decades of service, remembered with rose-tinted amnesia. No mention of Syria, of Havana, of her. Not one. That night, Alea curled up on the couch with a copy of The Souls of Black Folk. She was too young to fully grasp it, but she read anyway, highlighting lines, underlining phrases. Kendra watched from the kitchen doorway. Do you remember your mother? She asked quietly. Alea nodded. She used to play Tupac on vinyl, even when she was pregnant. Kendra smiled. She wasn't scared. Alea continued. Not even when the cops rolled past the house every day. Kendra's smile faltered. She didn't get scared until she knew I'd grow up. Black and smart. A long pause. Kendra walked over, sat beside her. She wanted you to be safe. That's why I'm here. Alea looked up. And who's keeping you safe? By the third day, Layla sent encrypted updates from Dubai. The audit was expanding. Anonymous whistleblowers had joined Nicole. Multiple former UN staff were stepping forward, backing Kendra's claims with files, testimonies, recordings. Momentum was real. And so was retaliation. On the fourth night, as Alea dozed beneath the blanket of Harlem moonlight, Kendra opened her tablet and found the message waiting. Subject line, your voice has been compromised. The sender was anonymous, but the attachment was not. It was a digital report, complete with letterhead from a US intelligence agency. The content? A fabricated dossier. Kendra's name, her photo, her passport details. Beneath it, a fabricated title, Foreign Agent Facilitating Terrorist Recruitment via Language Networks. The evidence was thin, Emails she never sent, Arabic phrases mistranslated to appear suspicious, bank statements doctored to look like offshore donation, but it looked real. Enough to make headlines. Enough to end her. Layla confirmed it minutes later. They're planting the lie before they confront the truth. If this circulates, it gives the world an excuse to forget what you said. Kendra felt her fingers curl into fists. It's Langston's last chess move, she muttered. Erase my credibility. Rewrite the revolution. Oma sent a direct message. Don't panic. We've survived worse. But Kendra couldn't ignore the tremor in her chest. It wasn't about her. It was about Alea. She could weather lies. She'd done it her whole life. But she wouldn't let her niece grow up watching justice be dragged through the dirt and called radicalism. By dawn, the fake report had leaked. Fox News ran it as developing intel. Alt-right blogs declared her a linguistic weapon for Middle Eastern propaganda. Social media bots flooded her name with slurs and doctored screenshots. Kendra the translator, a new implant, black terror sympathizer. Even mainstream outlets hesitated, their coverage laced with terms like unconfirmed sources and alleged connections. The truth she'd fought to surface was being buried again, this time under a mountain of false flags and convenient ignorance. But she wasn't the same woman who'd been erased before. This time she had witnesses. That afternoon, Professor Red Elk launched a counteroffensive. Using the council's encrypted channels, they published a forensic breakdown of the fake documents, metadata, timestamps, IP logs. It was pristine. The council's statement was brief but razor-sharp. Kendra Miles is not a terrorist. She is a translator of truth, and those who fear her words are proving her point. It went viral. But the damage wasn't undone. Not completely. Because suspicion clings tighter than truth. And America had always made it easier to believe a black woman was dangerous than brilliant. That night, Kendra lay awake while Alea slept. She stared at the ceiling, counting every microaggression that had led to this moment.
Every time a professor had corrected her when she was already right.
Every job rejection that cited fit. Every time someone said she was so articulate, like it was a surprise. The truth was, racism didn't always wear a hood. Sometimes, it wore a badge, or a title, or a press release. And now, it wore a fake dossier, with her name on it. She rose, walked to the window, and looked out at the city she'd once fought to leave. And realized, she was never meant to leave it behind. She was meant to return to claim it. Not for glory, but for justice. She picked up her tablet and began drafting a statement. If telling the truth makes me dangerous, then silence must be the safest lie on earth. But I will not lie. Not for comfort. Not for safety. Not even for survival. She sent it to the council. And then, just before sunrise, a message landed in her secure inbox. Encrypted. No signature. But the voice message was unmistakable. Langston. Smug. Weary. Still trying to sound in control. You think this ends with one speech? One file? They'll never let you win. You were never one of us. You were decoration. Until you became a threat. A pause.
Walk away.
Before we show the world who you really are. Kendra didn't flinch. She hit reply. Attached one image. The photo from the courtyard, caption still intact. We don't miss twice. And typed only one sentence. Neither do I. Moments later, a second message appeared. This one wasn't from Langston. It was a satellite image. A black SUV, parked 2 blocks from Alea's school. And a single text. You moved her just in time. The satellite image stayed on Kendra's screen long after the message disappeared. The SUV, black, unmarked, idle, was parked 2 blocks from Alea's school, only hours before they pulled her out. The timestamp chilled her more than the vehicle. They were already watching. And now, they were watching her disappear. In the days that followed, Kendra did the unthinkable. She went silent. No press conferences, no interviews, no tweets, no posts, not even encrypted whispers to the council. She unplugged everything but the hard lines to the server room, buried beneath Layla's firewall-stacked lab. She turned off the lights in her Harlem safe house, blacked out the windows, and waited as the world outside spun itself into a frenzy. The media turned vicious within 4. First came the headlines. Where is Kendra Miles? Hero or hoax? Silence of the translator. Truth or tactical? Then the anchors weighed in. Why isn't she addressing the allegation? If she's innocent, why disappear? Even whistleblowers must remain accountable. Talk shows held entire panels on her moral ambiguity. Conservative outlets questioned her citizenship. Liberal ones debated whether her silence was strategic or suspicious. The irony was poetic. The woman once buried by forced silence was now vilified for choosing it. But Kendra wasn't hiding. She was arming. Inside the lab, Layla's underground team, a skeletal crew of trusted activists and digital archivists, began organizing what would become the most comprehensive truth depository ever built on modern institutional misinformation.
They called it Project
7 continents. 7 years of redacted files. 7 truths per country. Nicole coded the interface. Red Elk curated the historical footnotes. Alma translated every piece into plain language for global accessibility. And Kendra? She mapped the war, timelines, testimonies, raw video, metadata trails, witness statements, all stitched into a lattice of undeniable evidence, cross-verified, time-stamped and sealed under blockchain integrity. Every time she opened a new file, she whispered the names of the erased: Rachel, Syria, Daniel, Kenya, me. On the 7th day of silence, her inbox flooded again. This time, with invitations. CNN, Al Jazeera, BBC, Democracy Now! Every network wanted the same thing. The final word. But Kendra didn't want spectacle. She wanted architecture. So she said yes to only one. Global Current. A live, unedited, uncut program with no commercial breaks and full editorial control to the guest. 1 hour. One voice. No escape. The broadcast was set for Sunday evening. By the time she arrived at the studio, dressed in charcoal gray and cobalt blue, the streets outside buzzed with camera flashes and speculation. Inside, the lights were clinical. But the host's eyes were sincere. Her name was Nadira Halim, a British-Pakistani journalist, known for her integrity and surgical interviewing style. She didn't waste time. "Are you ready?" she asked, mics being clipped to their collars. "I've been ready since they erased me," Kendra said. The live countdown flashed on screen. 3. The theme music faded, and the world tuned in. Nadira opened. "Tonight we speak with Kendra Miles, former UN linguist, whistleblower, target of global misinformation. Miss Miles, thank you." Kendra raised a hand gently. "No introductions tonight. Let's start with the lie." Nadira blinked, then nodded. "The documents?" Kendra opened a leather folder. Inside, a sequence of 5 original memos, proving Langston's manipulation, her testimony, the timeline, the whistleblower edits. Each document carried metadata, chain of custody, UN watermarks. "This," she said, holding them up, "is what was buried." Then she opened her tablet, played Langston's audio. The slurs, the laughter, the strategic erasure. "This," she continued, "is what was normalized." And then she opened a second folder. One the public hadn't seen. Emails between Langston and 3 other officials, referencing her as an internal agitator with loyalty to regional identities. "We can't let her frame our intent with ethnic sensitivity," one wrote. Kendra let the words hang in the air. Then, this was never about mistranslation. It was about disobedience. Nadira asked her gently, "Do you believe the UN is salvageable?" Kendra's voice didn't rise, but it cut. "I believe institutions cannot be redeemed until they stop rewarding obedience over integrity." "And what about the claims that you were involved in recruitment for?" Kendra opened the 3rd folder. Bank logs. Forged. Metadata analysis proving fabrication. Names of fake witnesses. All discredited. "They created the lie," she said, "and expected me to spend my life disproving it." She paused, looked straight into the camera. And for the next 5 minutes, she didn't quote reports or files. She quoted history. Emmett Till's body spoke louder than his mother's screams. COINTELPRO taught America how to assassinate reputations before bullets. Martin was on every no-fly list before they put him on a postage stamp. She paused again. Longer. "You didn't fear me because I was wrong," she said, voice calm as glass. "You feared me because I was right. And black." Silence. Not just in the studio. Across homes, airports, phones, living rooms. The stream flooded with tears and fists in disbelief. "Justice in Arabic. Black translator truth." We heard her. Kendra looked at Nadira. "Any final question?" she asked. Nadira shook her head slowly. "I think you answered everything." Kendra smiled. Soft, tired, free. But the moment the stream hit 1.6 million concurrent views, the screen glitched. First a flicker, Then a frame froze.
Then, black.
Silent. Viewers screamed into voided chat rooms. Phones refreshed endlessly. The screen read, "This stream has been terminated due to content violation." Inside the studio, the crew scrambled. Producers cursed. Nadira stood. "We're off air," she said. They cut the signal. Kendra didn't speak. She closed her tablet. Eyes blank. "Is it gone?" Nadira asked. "No," Kendra said, standing. "They only took the live feed." She turned toward the exit. Now they'll have to chase the replay. Outside, phones rang. Inside the council's global network, Red Elk's server pinged. Nicole smirked.
Backup's already running.
Layla texted Kendra one line. They blinked first. But back in the car, Kendra received a different message. From an unlisted number. It wasn't text, it was a video. She opened it slowly. It showed her Harlem safe house. The window. The book on Alea's desk. The blanket folded exactly the way she left it. Then the camera turned to a wall. And on that wall, written in lipstick, "We can still find her." As Kendra's breath caught, her phone pinged again. A location pin dropped. Cairo. Downtown. Midnight. And one message. "Come alone. Or the story ends with her." When the live feed went dark, the world didn't go silent. It screamed. First in confusion, then in fury. Screens across 5 continents froze at the same frame. Kendra's face mid-sentence, her lips just beginning to form the words. "You feared me." And then, nothing. The blackout was surgical, but the internet wasn't. Within 11 minutes, mere uploads appeared. First on underground blogs, then on VPN-protected servers, then on social media pages in languages even the censors didn't read. By the 1-hour mark, the entire uncut interview had been uploaded in full across Reddit, Twitter re-uploaded, 17 PeerTube, Telegram, encrypted Discord channels, TikTok, cut into viral 30-second stabs of truth. By morning, Kendra was right trended globally, flanked by "Listen to Kendra. Justice in Arabic." They cut the truth. Translation is power in Chicago. Students staged a sit-in at the University of Chicago's International Relations Department, replacing every classroom whiteboard with one quote. "You feared me not because I was wrong, but because I was right." And black. In Cairo, protesters flooded Tahrir Square with signs in Arabic and English. "Al-Haqiqa mamnura." The truth is forbidden. We translate ourselves now. In London, members of parliament were grilled by local press. Did the UK have a role in cutting Kendra Miles' feed? No comment. In Geneva, a group of junior UN staffers walked out silently, each wearing a single word across their back.
Erased.
Kendra watched it unfold not from a podium or studio, but from a nondescript cafe in downtown Amman, Jordan. Her location still under heavy encryption, her niece now safely relocated under layers of aliases. Her face remained unreadable. But her silence this time wasn't fear. It was confirmation. Across her tablet screen, messages poured in. "You gave us language to fight. I didn't know until you said it in Arabic. They tried to mute you, but you became louder in silence." And then came the offers. Harvard emailed a formal invitation. "We'd be honored to welcome you back as a full professor. Name your department." The UN sent a private letter. "Our highest apologies. We are forming an internal committee. We believe you could guide it." 3 private think tanks reached out with lavish salaries, complete freedom, and carte blanche global travel. Kendra read each offer with calm detachment, then deleted them all. In a hidden conference room in Geneva, 3 UN directors debated damage control. "She refuses every channel," one said. "She's building something off-grid, and the world's listening," another added. "She's more dangerous without us than inside." They voted, unanimously, to pursue her as an official consultant, to absorb her credibility before it crystallized into full rebellion. But she was already one step ahead. Because Kendra didn't want a title. She wanted leverage. 2 days later, she walked through a corridor beneath an abandoned mosque in Amman. The underground path smelled like dust and revolution. A voice echoed softly at the end. "You made the world turn its head, Kendra." She stepped into the chamber, and there he was, the Tycoon, alive, dressed in his usual black, but this time, no entourage. No luxury watch, just a steel gaze, and a tablet in his hand. "You disappeared," she said, eyes narrowed. "I stepped back," he replied. "You needed space to rise." Kendra crossed her arms. "You staged this?" He shook his head. "I seeded it. You watered it. And they tried to burn it. but the fire revealed everything. He slid the tablet toward her. On the screen, a draft charter. Global Ethics Oversight Council. Founding Chair Proposal. Kendra Miles. She stared. You want me to oversee what exactly? She asked. Everything they hoped you wouldn't touch, he said. Institutional accountability. Policy review. Cross-cultural translation reform. Real-time integrity audits for multinational actions. She scrolled. A proposed structure. Decentralized. Powered by open-source surveillance tools. Diverse seats from Indigenous, Black, and non-Western communities. Annual transparency summits. Whistleblower protection clauses. Stronger than anything the UN had ever dared. You're not running an NGO, the Tycoon said. You're running the global conscience. Kendra blinked. It was radical, and it was real. But she also knew what came with it. Assassination by reputation, corporate resistance, death threats, character distortions, and worst of all, co-optation disguised as praise. She looked up. Why me? Because they built systems to silence someone like you, he said. And you built a voice powerful enough to survive it. That night, she sat on a rooftop under the desert stars, her tablet glowing against the stone railing. Alea's message blinked on screen. Did you finally break the internet? Kendra smiled softly. No, she typed back. I just helped it remember what it was for. But just as she closed the tablet, Layla's encrypted call came through. Her voice was tight. Urgent. Kendra, listen. We've tracked a pattern in the smear campaign code. Someone's rerouting the fake data not just through government proxies, but through non-profit funders. Kendra sat up.
Who?
Your Harvard offer. It's linked to one of them. Silence. Then, they're trying to buy the revolution before it matures. Kendra didn't speak. She walked back inside, pulled out the printed offer she hadn't shredded yet. Then she reached for her pen and began writing her own offer. By morning it would be public. The Kendra Accord, a new standard for ethics and representation in global institutions. No endorsements. No sponsorships. Only people. The preamble read, "We are the translators of truth. When history is rewritten in silence, we write it again in every tongue they tried to erase." But just as her team hit publish, an old number pinged her private line. Marta, trembling, out of breath. I found something, she whispered. It's buried in the 2013 declassified Syria folder. U.S. communications that prove the field reports were not just misread. Kendra leaned forward. What then? Marta exhaled. They were invented. From the beginning. Fabricated targets. False Arabic phrases. Whole operations launched from fiction. Kendra's blood chilled. This wasn't just translation manipulation. This was war engineered through linguistic fraud. And just then, another message came through. The satellite feed from Cairo. The coordinates from the lipstick message. A door. A time. A new voice, this time digitally scrambled, spoke from her tablet. You have 12 hours. Bring the truth with you. Or she disappears. Attached, a photo of a room. A girl's bracelet on the floor. Alea's Kendra turned to Layla. I'll go, she said. But not to negotiate. She opened her suitcase. Inside the original Havana files. I'm going to make sure the whole world hears what they tried to bury before they bury her. The morning air in Cairo was different from New York, or Dubai. It didn't just move. It carried memory, dust, salt, jasmine, diesel, and something else. Resolve. Kendra walked through a narrow stone alley at sunrise, her black coat trailing dust, her suitcase rolled silently behind her. Inside it, the files from Havana, the proof of manipulation, the voices buried in language, but never in conscience. Layla had begged her not to go alone. But Kendra wasn't alone. She carried every erased voice inside her. And one more now. Alea. 12 hours to reach the location. She didn't waste a second. But that was the previous section. Now, after Cairo, after the confrontation, no one thought she'd survive. Kendra stood before the newly restructured council, not as a symbol, not as a survivor, as a refuser of erasure. It had been 3 weeks since the live stream. 2 weeks since the Havana documents detonated across global media. 7 days since her niece had been found, shaken but safe, in a cellar under a condemned satellite compound once used for surveillance ops. Alea didn't cry. She whispered. They didn't break me. Kendra believed her. The council chamber was no longer housed in luxury or hidden compounds. Kendra had insisted on a public building. Old, repurposed, accessible. They chose an abandoned library in Lisbon. Glass ceilings smashed, wood restored, languages engraved on the walls in 30 dialects, from Swahili to Navajo. A new structure, a new soul. No one sat at the head. There was no head. Every member trans-disabled, formerly incarcerated, exiled, misgendered, undocumented, erased, held equal vote. Kendra stood beside Layla, Marta, Nicole, Amma, Red Elk, and behind her, rows of new voices. A council of the unheard. She began. I will accept the role, she said, voice steady, hands clasped. But only if 3 things are non-negotiable. The chamber hushed. 1. No elite advisory panels, no closed doors. This remains grassroots. 2. Every file we uncover, no matter how sensitive, will be documented in plain language and made public. No spin, no press filters. 3. This seat remains temporary. No person becomes the movement. I'm a bridge, not a monument. There was silence. Then one by one, people stood. Agreement.
Not applause.
Affirmation. That afternoon, the council voted unanimously. The new title, Global Ethics Architect. Not a leader. A builder. Not an overseer. A translator of systems, turning corruption into clarity, silence into scaffolding. The announcement shook the world again, but Kendra didn't sit for interviews. She didn't host galas or give TED Talks. She rebuilt. Over the next 6 months, the council launched the Trans Truth Database, an open-source multilingual repository of whistleblower documents, translation discrepancies, and declassified manipulation from governments, NGOs, and media outlets. Within 30 days, 3 ministers resigned. Within 60, the UN was forced to rehire 5 black linguists wrongfully terminated in. By the 90-day mark, CNN aired a full series titled, What Kendra Knew. At night, in her Lisbon apartment, Kendra would sit by the window, watching the moon light up the cobblestone streets. Alea, now 17, would study on the couch, her tablet open to dual language lessons. She had chosen Arabic as her major. I want to translate things right, she said. Kendra looked at her with a quiet smile. Then do it dangerously. They would laugh, soft and defiant. Despite her global status, Kendra lived simply. She refused security details, traveled in regular coach seats, spoke at local universities, often anonymous. Everywhere she went, people didn't just see a public figure. They saw a woman who had once mopped their floors. And that was her greatest armor. Because when you're built from ashes, no storm can burn you down. But just when peace began to settle, a letter arrived, handwritten, postmarked from the French countryside, no return address. Inside, 2 pages. The handwriting was precise, deliberate, feminine. Dear Miss Miles, my name is Camille Langston. I am the daughter of the man who nearly ended your life. Kendra's hands froze. She sat down slowly. The ink bled slightly from the pen pressure. I found his recordings, not the ones you released. Others, private, ones I now believe he never intended to survive. He recorded his justifications, his strategies, his hate, but also his unraveling. Kendra read on, breath thin. He used to call you the ghost in the syntax. He said you understood the system too well, and that scared everyone more than any weapon ever could. I want to apologize. Not for him. He made his choices. But for the silence I kept. I knew who you were. I knew what he did. And I said nothing. Because I believed him. My father. A man who told me justice was abstract and language was a battlefield. You proved him right. Not in what he feared, but in what he tried to destroy. At the bottom was one line. If you ever want to see the full recordings, I will come to you. No press, no attention, just truth. Kendra folded the letter gently, put it in the drawer beside her bed. She didn't cry, but she wrote a reply that night. It began with, Dear Camille, thank you for surviving the fire without becoming its smoke. As she sealed the envelope, Layla burst through the door, her face pale, holding a tablet. There's been a breach, she said. Kendra stood. Where?
Layla whispered.
The Vatican. Their translation archives just went dark. And the screen lit up with one final message. They're coming for the languages now. The letter from Camille Langston lay on the polished tabletop where sunlight streamed through the Lisbon apartment window. It looked fragile, handwritten in ink that bled slightly around the edges. Fragile like truth in a world built on erasure. For Kendra, it held the weight of a confession she'd waited a lifetime to hear. Camille's letter had done more than apologize. It carried evidence, audio files, private journals, unsent memos, her father's own words, recorded before he died, admitting every manipulation, every lie, every erased translation that led to catastrophe. He had confessed the war he orchestrated, not on land but on language. Kendra looked at Alea across the room. Her niece had paused in her Arabic studies, headphones dangling, eyes wide but steady. "Kendra?" she asked, voice low. "Is this what closure sounds like?" Kendra folded the letter carefully. "Yes," she said. "This is what closure sounds like." Late afternoon light softened across the room, but Kendra's vision remained sharp. She plugged the encrypted USB drive given to her by Camille into her personal terminal, one she had prepared for exactly this moment. As the files decrypted, she steeled herself. Langston's voice came through first, quiet, collected. He spoke of rationales, of necessary manipulation to maintain stability. He named names, admitted that warnings from local scholars, from refugees, from her all were dismissed because they didn't fit the narrative. Then came the audio she had longed for. The confession of his downfall. I realized too late that she wasn't translating countries. She was translating silences. I tried to bury her language. Instead, she built languages out of my silence. There was a pause. She was never voiceless. I made the world deaf. Kendra's hand trembled as she shut off the playback. She didn't weep at that moment. She fell apart. Not in rage, not in victory, not even in sorrow, but in relief. The decades of tension of forced invisibility slid off her bones. She wept for her mother, for the children in Syria, for the half-remembered ghost of her own brilliance. Alea watched. She moved across the room and leaned her head against Kendra's shoulder. They didn't speak, because sometimes silence is stronger than theme music or speeches. When she finished, Kendra backed away and exhaled. Undone. Her voice cracked not in exhaustion, but in certification. She turned to the council lineup on her screen. They'd gathered in Lisbon. The architects, the survivors, the builders of Global Ethics Council. She pressed share. A dozen monitors flickered to life. She watched as Langston's final audio and journals uploaded onto the TransTruth database. No headlines, no press filters, just undistorted truth, time-stamped and verified. A week later, she flew back to New York. The weather was mild. The city seemed calmer, muted. She walked the familiar route to the old Zenith Luxor building, where she'd once scrubbed the marble floors in silence. She pressed her palms to the glass door and remembered the sound of her mop against stone, the whispers behind every polished suit. Inside, nothing looked the same. Because inside, everything had changed. Executives passed her without recognition, most built-in denial, not arrogance. But at the lobby end, a plaque had been installed under a mural. She approached, 5 lines of Arabic, calligraphed in bronze. Allati istama'at, thumma takallam, the one who listened, and then spoke. Under it, a translation. She was never voiceless. We were just deaf. Kendra's chest tightened. She closed her eyes. This was no monument.
This was vindication.
She stood there a long time, eyes wet but proud. A custodian in the lobby approached, nodding respectfully, a janitorial uniform crisp and clean. "Is this need a public entrance?" the young woman asked, voice hesitant but curious. "Yes," Kendra replied softly. The young woman paused. "I work the early shift. I honk before the doors open, so I don't wake everyone." Kendra smiled. "My name's Roxanne," the woman continued. "Roxanne Harris." Kendra extended a hand. "Kendra Miles." Roxanne's eyes went wide as she processed the plaque, the line, the history in the lobby. "You're her," she said. "The one they always talked about." "I'm her," Kendra corrected gently. Roxanne looked around.
I read the story online. You spoke.
She trailed off, voice cracking slightly. Kendra reached down and pulled out a small book from her coat pocket. "Arabic for Beginners." "I started learning," Roxanne said, "because I wanted to understand." Kendra's eyes softened. "You're here now." They both stood quietly amid the rush of white-collar workers and reflective glass. But for a moment the skyscraper held its breath. She left without descending to the boardrooms, without banners or cameras, just a nod to Roxanne. Outside, the city felt different. The wind seemed softer, as if the world had loosened its spine. Kendra walked toward the subway, her steps measured. Alea was already at home, reading under her makeshift Arabic printouts. Text from Layla arrived. Damage report complete. Vatican archives still offline. Requests for transparency pouring in. Kendra exhaled. She typed back. Let them knock down language. They won't stop meaning. Days passed. The Zenith Luxor building held public meetings now. Its boardrooms opened for translation integrity summits. Roxanne, the new janitor, greeted guests in Arabic and English. The mural remained. The plaque remained. It wasn't a museum. It was a declaration. But one afternoon, another envelope arrived at Kendra's safe house. No return address. Inside, a sealed note. Written in Camille's handwriting again. Just 3 sentences. If they rebuilt their integrity to erase you, they can rebuild their denial again. You must prepare. Be ready to move the council's heart into vulnerable territories. The next language no one expects to be powerful. Your granddaughter's tongue. There was no name at the bottom. But the intent was clear. Kendra sat at her desk with Alea beside her. Alea looked up. What did she say? She asked. Kendra gave her a small nod. Alea didn't press. She just leaned into her aunt's presence. Kendra rose and stood at the window, sunlight bathing her. She thought of Roxanne, of the plaque, of every voice now visible. This wasn't just history. This was alignment. She pressed a button. A map appeared of proposed council expansion locations. Next phase, language justice in hidden zones. Places where tongues were silenced by conflict, by diaspora, by erasure. Let's build the next seat, she whispered to herself. Unsent message lined up on her screen, blinking quietly in draft. To Grandma Dolores, wherever you are, watch me. They tried to erase her story, just like so many others before her. But truth doesn't vanish, it multiplies. If her voice moved something in you, don't let it fade. Type yes, if you believe in justice. Share this if silence is no longer an option. The letter from Camille Langston lay on the polished tabletop, where sunlight streamed through the Lisbon apartment window. It looked fragile, handwritten, in ink that bled slightly around the edges. Fragile like truth in a world built on erasure. For Kendra, it held the weight of a confession she'd waited a lifetime to hear. Camille's letter had done more than apologize. It carried evidence, audio files, private journals, unsent memos, her father's own words, recorded before he died, admitting every manipulation, every lie, every erased translation that led to catastrophe. He had confessed the war he orchestrated, not on land, but on language. Kendra looked at Alea, across the room. Her niece had paused in her Arabic studies, headphones dangling, eyes wide but steady. Kendra, she asked, voice low. Is this what closure sounds like? Kendra folded the letter carefully. Yes, she said. This is what closure sounds like. Late afternoon light softened across the room, but Kendra's vision remained sharp. She plugged the encrypted USB drive given to her by Camille into her personal terminal, one she had prepared for exactly this moment. As the files decrypted, she steeled herself. Langston's voice came through first, quiet, collected. He spoke of rationales, of necessary manipulation to maintain stability. He named names, admitted that warnings from local scholars, from refugees, from her, all were dismissed because they didn't fit the narrative. Then came the audio she had longed for. The confession of his downfall. I realized too late that she wasn't translating countries. She was translating silences. I tried to bury her language. Instead, she built languages out of my silence. There was a pause. She was never voiceless. I made the world deaf. Kendra's hand trembled as she shut off the playback. She didn't weep at that moment. She fell apart. Not in rage. Not in victory. Not even in sorrow. But in release. The decades of tension, of forced invisibility, slid off her bones. She wept for her mother, for the children in Syria, for the half-remembered ghost of her own brilliance. Alea watched. She moved across the room and leaned her head against Kendra's shoulder. They didn't speak, because sometimes, silence is stronger than theme music, or speeches. When she finished, Kendra backed away and exhaled. I'm done. Her voice cracked not in exhaustion, but in certification. She turned to the council lineup on her screen. They'd gathered in Lisbon, the architects, the survivors, the builders of Global Ethics Council. She pressed share. A dozen monitors flickered to life. She watched as Langston's final audio and journals uploaded onto the Trans-Truth database. No headlines, no press filters, just undistorted truth, time-stamped and verified. A week later, she flew back to New York. The weather was mild. The city seemed calmer, muted. She walked the familiar route to the old Zenith Luxor building, where she'd once scrubbed the marble floors in silence. She pressed her palms to the glass door and remembered the sound of her mop against stone, the whispers behind every polished suit. Inside, nothing looked the same, because inside, everything had changed. Executives passed her without recognition, most built-in denial, not arrogance. But at the lobby end, a plaque had been installed under a mural. She approached. 5 lines of Arabic, calligraphed in bronze. التي استمعت ثم تكلمت. The one who listened, and then spoke. Under it a translation. She was never voiceless. We were just deaf. Kendra's chest tightened. She closed her eyes. This was no monument. This was vindication. She stood there a long time, eyes wet but proud. A custodian in the lobby approached, nodding respectfully, a janitorial uniform crisp and clean.
Is this, ma'am, a public entrance?
The young woman asked, voice hesitant, but curious. Yes, Kendra replied softly. The young woman paused. I work the early shift. I honk before the doors open, so I don't wake everyone. Kendra smiled. My name's Roxanne, the woman continued. Roxanne Harris. Kendra extended a hand. Kendra Miles. Roxanne's eyes went wide as she processed the plaque. The line, the history in the lobby. You're her, she said. The one they always talked about? I'm her, Kendra corrected gently. Roxanne looked around. I read the story online. You spoke. She trailed off, voice cracking slightly. Kendra reached down and pulled out a small book from her coat pocket. Arabic for beginners. I started learning, Roxanne said, because I wanted to understand. Kendra's eyes softened. You're here now. They both stood quietly amid the rush of white-collar workers and reflective glass. But for a moment, the skyscraper held its breath. She left without descending to the boardrooms, without banners or cameras, just a nod to Roxanne. Outside, the city felt different. The wind seemed softer, as if the world had loosened its spine. Kendra walked toward the subway, her steps measured. Alea was already at home, reading under her makeshift Arabic printouts. Text from Layla arrived. Damage report complete. Vatican archives still offline. Request for transparency pouring in. Kendra exhaled. She typed back. Let them knock down language. They won't stop meaning. Days passed. The Zenith Luxor building held public meetings now. Its boardrooms opened for translation integrity summits. Roxanne, the new janitor, greeted guests in Arabic and English. The mural remained. The plaque remained. It wasn't a museum. It was a declaration. But one afternoon, another envelope arrived at Kendra's safe house. No return address. Inside, a sealed note, written in Camille's handwriting again. Just 3 sentences. If they rebuilt their integrity to erase you, they can rebuild their denial again. You must prepare. Be ready to move the council's heart into vulnerable territories. The next language no one expects to be powerful. Your granddaughter's tongue. There was no name at the bottom, but the intent was clear. Kendra sat at her desk with Alea beside her. Alea looked up. What did she say? She asked. Kendra gave her a small nod. Alea didn't press. She just leaned into her aunt's presence. Kendra rose and stood at the window, sunlight bathing her. She thought of Roxanne, of the plaque, of every voice now visible.
This wasn't just history.
This was alignment. She pressed a button. A map appeared of proposed council expansion locations. Next phase, language justice in hidden zones. Places where tongues were silenced by conflict, by diaspora, by erasure. Let's build the next seat, she whispered to herself. Unsent message lined up on her screen, blinking quietly in draft. To Grandma Dolores, wherever you are, watch me. They tried to erase her story, just like so many others before her. But truth doesn't vanish. It multiplies. If her voice moved something in you, don't let it fade. Type yes.